games. So what grammar should I teach? Some teachers, you're handed a curriculum, or often the curriculum is your textbook, but some of us don't have anything. So what do you teach right now? Or what should we teach? So I would substitute what grammar or vocabulary. What do you think, teachers, or what are you doing?
Yeah, so what do you think, everyone? What grammar should you teach, or what grammar or vocabulary are you teaching now? Let's see, Hussein says it depends on their level. Jackie says things that foster real communication. What topics for vocabulary and what topics for grammar might you need to focus on? Let's see, Noreen says daily life grammar. So maybe that's routines or like simple present, that sort of thing. Rai also says daily routines. Let's see, Muhammad says he does grammar with pictures.
Great.
Yeah, some people are saying sort of everyday life or basic English, tenses, parts of speech. And a few people have been saying it depends on students' needs, like Yolanda. So excellent, great responses, everybody.
Yeah, these are all great. And a few of them I heard they are based on vocabulary. So here's my answer. Here's from my experience, and I'm glad we heard from your experience. So we do start, which grammar? We start with this vocabulary, because vocabulary is tied to grammar through chunks. So let me explain that. Let's say we have our daily routines, as you talked about, or in this webinar, we're going to talk about colors. So we choose a set, whatever in our book. We find or create a meaningful task in which you can practice that vocabulary. So teachers, take these workshops and go learn a lot of activities, because these are your resources for your curriculum. So I knew this game called the Mystery Bag, and that's a meaningful task in which you can practice the colors. Now, how can they participate? With a chunk or a fixed phrase. So the chunk would be, is it blue, yellow, that phrase, so you can participate. So you provide that as a teacher for them. Now this part, at the end, think about where you will start and where you want to go. So I will start with the chunk, is it, but I will add adjectives. Is it yellow? Is it a yellow pencil? Is it a small yellow pencil? If I go to animals, does it fly? Is it green? So you're going to start, and you have to think about how you're going to expand, embed in vocabulary, in grammar, in your chunks. So that is how I do it. So basically the teachers, you said all of them are correct answers, but this gives you a way in which to organize and present to the students.
Great, and I can see when you choose to start with the vocabulary words, you're choosing to focus on meaning first, and then provide some of the structure for them to play with the language as well. That sounds great.
Right, and remember we talked about kids as egocentric, so it's concrete. What can I see and touch? Those are vocabulary words. But when we add that chunk there, there's our grammar. We'll have lots more examples with the game. All right, we're ready to answer the third question and get close to our games. All right, so how do you teach? I put that with quotation marks because that's tricky. I don't have one answer to this. If anybody wants to comment while I'll tell you how I do it, how do you teach grammar? I'm going to go ahead and answer because I know this can be done in several ways, just for time's sake. So number one, as you'll see in the games today, I expose them to rich oral, that's key, oral language experiences. Everything you mentioned, songs, poems, games, stories. They need lots of data, or else what are you going to, what grammar do you have? You know, they need to have rich background of language. That's number one. Number two, now this is a little bit of overlap. You need to automatize. What does that mean? You need chunks, you need vocabulary ready to use, okay? Ready for use. We make it automatic so they don't have to go through the whole song and the whole rhyme to get the language available. So we're focusing on these first two in this webinar for the young learners. However, notice, let's say we start with a chunk like, is it yellow, for example, but then we move to animals or something and we need does it. And the children, you'll see, know very well is it, but when we introduce does it and we mix them, they get confused. So they have to notice what words come after is and what comes after does it. Okay, we have action verbs. So you can either do this orally with the young learners, but it's so much easier once they're reading and writing well in their first and second language. So if you can put off writing and more formal grammar to later, you will have a richer experience. Now, the last one, focus on form. Don't get scared of that. A lot of people think that impedes or that prevents communication, but I don't think that that's the case. We have to focus on form. We give the children correct ways to say things in our songs and poems. And we also want them to practice correctly. There's a phrase I love from a book that I'll have in the reference section, Madeline Hunter's Mastery Teaching. It says, practice makes permanent. Okay, so if we practice and practice the wrong thing, then we're going to have a lot of errors. But this, you want to focus on form. So when you create a new task that they have available with that automatic language, they'll be able to choose the right form. And that's part of scaffolding. You want them to feel confident.
Wonderful.
Oh,
I have a really nice question from Mahmoudal, who says, how do we make sure that young learners are noticing that part there, number 3? How do we make sure that they're noticing that grammar?
well, you, teacher, will have to be very sensitive and observe. What they'll notice is, you'll notice is they're going to make errors. You have to be very attuned to the errors and that first language. Is the first language similar to the second language? What kind of errors are they making because of that? So once errors come up because you've introduced does it have instead of just is it, they're not noticing in an obvious way to you, but you're noticing that they're having a problem selecting, and this is where you come in. So you'll just take some time and produce a pattern with is it, is it, is it. Say, what kind of words come next? Oh, they're colors. Words. And the other one are action verbs. Right, done. For the young learners, you're done. That's your grammar explanation.
Great.
Great question.
Great. And one question from Ahmad, who says, I think they're referring to automatize part. Does the rote learning and memorization help them? I think he means using the number 2, automatize.
Right. And that's another thing, like focus on form. Teachers like, no, you can't do drills and things. Yes, you can. I mean, we all learned our times tables that way. We can get the verbs, irregular verbs into muscle memory, maybe later on. So that's our poems and our drills. Think of them as big chunks. We get that language inside them orally, so that with repetition, it's available for use. And
wonderful.
So,
yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
I could teach a class on this, but okay, I have a question for you then. Basically, this is kind of a review of everything we talked about. I'm going to change this first question a little bit. Have you noticed in this introduction, before we play the games, that I'm suggesting for young learners that we teach grammar indirectly or directly? By indirectly, I mean that we're not writing down rules and using grammar terms and necessarily focusing on that explicitly rather than the game or the task, or directly, so the opposite. What do you think? What is my suggestion? I for indirectly and D for directly.
Great. What do you think? So we've heard a lot about the ideas here for helping our students who are younger learners with their grammar. What do you think? Is this more of an indirect or a direct approach? Let's see. Lydia, Miriam, and Lizzie also all are saying indirect. So is Nguyen, at Stuco, Ahmad, Lots of people, Mohammed, Lilith, many people are saying indirectly. And are they kind of picking up what you're sharing here? Are they on
Not
track?
kind of, they're right on the money. They're getting it.
Great.
However, like I said, I can teach a course on this. Sometimes we don't have a choice. It's in our books, it's in our curriculum, it's on our national exams. We have to. But when we have that direct one, I want you to start indirectly and have them discover it before you do this. So I'm going to answer the second question unless somebody has answered it in the comments. My suggestion as a rule of thumb, again, many things depend on this. I would not start teaching that more direct grammar because we are already, let's face it, through our chunks, we are teaching grammar directly, but not until the age of 9, 10. Just put it off as much as you can. At least the whole semester of first grade, try to push that directness that you might have to do later. That's my suggestion for you. You'll really benefit from this rich oral language and the indirect teaching.
Sounds good. Mathilde says, I think grammar is part of any learning process, but you don't have to mention it.
Exactly. It's all grammar, right? Mm-hmm. And that's part of Children See Things as a whole. They're not worried about it. We are. Okay. So last, as a review, before we move on to our first game, we're getting close, Kate. Okay, let's make sure we really understand the concept of chunks. Okay, chunks or performance pieces. Performance piece is a word I got from the British Council website. I love that. So what is my line in this game? What do I need to say? It's a formula or fixed phrase. So again, this is from Cameron's book. Chunks are groups of words that can be found together in language. So we have our vocabulary and we give them the chunk, and there's our grammar. It's linked with grammar. They're the building blocks of language for young learners. So it's like in the beginning, this is how we start. Teachers support or scaffold, that's the word again, remember, just enough support or help for the active participation. Look at the word active. We want them to participate and we need to give them something, that chunk. Here's an example. Is it yellow, blue, orange, black, blue? Okay. And then the answer would be, yes, it is. No, it isn't. They don't have to know what each one of those words mean. They just know, and it's intuitive for them because it's a whole, that phrase means that. Believe